The smell of rain lingered, but it had not fallen in hours. Rachel Monroe stood barefoot in the kitchen of a rental house tucked deep into the Blue Ridge Mountains, a chipped coffee mug in hand, steam rising from the black liquid like smoke. Outside, the morning light filtered through pine trees and fog, peaceful and gray. Birds chirped. Wind moved gently through the evergreens. The world looked normal. Then the phone rang. Not her cell. That was turned off, buried inside a Ziploc bag beneath the woodpile out back. This was the landline, a number only 3 people knew. 2 of them were dead. Rachel's grip tightened on the mug. Her heartbeat began its familiar climb. She crossed the room slowly and picked up the receiver. Yes. There was silence. Then, a voice she had not heard in over 8 years. They have her, Rachel. Her body went cold. What? They took your daughter. In D.C., 20 minutes ago. The voice was gravel, male, clipped. No emotion. Who the hell is this? Rachel demanded, even though she already knew. Langley's off the grid. You were burned, but someone remembered your name. Your kid was leverage. Listen to me. But Rachel had already hung up. Her hands trembled as she ran to the bedroom, yanking open drawers and pulling out a false bottom. Beneath layers of flannel and socks lay a black duffel bag. She unzipped it, revealing a Glock 19, 4 magazines, 2 passports, and a pack of burner phones, all dustless. All waiting. She stared at the gun for a moment. Her fingers hovered. Then she grabbed it, loaded a mag with muscle memory, chambered around, and slipped it into her waistband. The bag went over her shoulder. She was out the door in 25 seconds. The woods swallowed the house behind her. Rachel sprinted through the trees until she reached the dirt path leading to her pickup. Her mind was racing now, not with panic, but with protocol. Escape routes, contacts, burners. Who had her? Why now? Sophie, 15 years old, black hoodie, chipped nail polish, defiant eyes, and a razor wit. She had not seen her mother in almost a decade. Rachel had made sure of that. Now she was gone. The engine turned over. Rachel shoved the duffel onto the passenger seat and hit the road, gravel kicking up behind her. She drove with one hand and punched numbers into a burner phone with the other. The first number rang 6 times before someone answered. "You are not supposed to call this line," a woman said sharply. Rachel ignored her. "Sophie's been taken." The woman was silent. "I need access, logs, surveillance from D.C. in the last hour." "I told you." Rachel's voice dropped to ice. "She is my daughter." Another pause. Then, "You will get 1 hour. After that, you are on your own." "I have always been on my own." The line went dead. Rachel drove faster. The fog thickened as she crossed state lines, leaving behind the sanctuary she had built piece by piece. That cabin was supposed to be the place where everything stopped, the place she disappeared. After 37 missions, 4 black ops, and 1 betrayal that left blood on her hands and a career in ashes, Rachel Monroe had buried her past in the woods. But now the past had clawed its way out. An hour later, in a parking garage beneath a rest stop off I-66, she received a text on the burner. Unknown number. Coordinates. Timestamp. A single image. Rachel's breath caught. Sophie. Bound at the wrists, gagged, in the back of a van, eyes wide with terror. The image was grainy, low light, but Rachel recognized the seal on the floor of the van. A small, circular symbol, 3 interlocking rings. It was not a gang, not a cartel. It was a private contractor's mark, an off-book unit. She had dealt with them once, years ago, during a cleanup job in Caracas. They trafficked in secrets the government could not admit it knew. If they were involved now, someone with clearance had given the green light, which meant this was not random. This was personal. Rachel stared at the phone until her pulse slowed. Then she threw it out the window, restarted the truck, and headed east. The government had burned her. But they had just made a fatal mistake. They came for the wrong person's child. As she drove, the rain finally came. Heavy, cold, and relentless. The sound pounded against the windshield like war drums. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter. She thought of Sophie's face. The last time she saw her, she was 5 years old, clinging to a stuffed giraffe. Rachel had kissed her forehead and disappeared into the night, to protect her. And now, all of that meant nothing. She reached into the duffel and pulled out the second burner. A different number, one she had sworn never to use again. It rang once. "Rachel." A man's voice, soft, broken. "I need help. You said never again. They took Sophie." A pause. "Where?" "DC." Another pause. "You are going to burn everything to the ground, aren't you?" Her voice was flat. "Yes. I am in." Rachel hung up. The sky darkened as she left Virginia behind, heading straight into the storm. She would have to go back to a world she had abandoned, a world of dead drops, code names, and kill orders. She would have to unearth allies she no longer trusted and enemies she had almost forgotten. There were no rules now, and no safe house left. The man waiting at the train yard in Baltimore looked nothing like a former asset handler. He wore a hoodie, jeans, and a Baltimore Orioles cap pulled low over tired eyes. But Rachel recognized him instantly, by the limp in his left leg and the slight twitch in his jaw when nervous. Ben Keller, CIA field operative, disavowed, like her. She parked the truck 2 blocks away, approached on foot, and kept her right hand in her coat pocket, fingers resting on the grip of the Glock. "You look terrible," he said without turning. "You look slower," she replied. Ben chuckled once, low. "Still quick with the insults. I heard about Langley." "I am not here to reminisce." He nodded toward a derelict boxcar. "Inside, out of sight." Rachel followed him in. The metal echoed their steps, and the air smelled of rust and oil. He tossed her a folded manila envelope. "Surveillance from DuPont Circle. Your daughter was taken at 3:08 p.m. yesterday. Black van, 4 operatives, unmarked, moved clean. No traffic cam data. But..." He pulled out a still image. "I caught this from a construction drone. Lucky angle." Rachel took the photo. It showed the van. More importantly, it showed a figure standing nearby, a man in a charcoal suit talking into a radio. Bald, broad shoulders, familiar. She squinted. "No way." Ben looked grim. "Yeah, that is Adrian Morrow." Rachel's jaw clenched. "He is supposed to be dead." "He faked his death 3 years ago, re-emerged on the contractor circuit under a dozen aliases. Word is, he is building his own network. Ex-Intel, hired guns, the worst kind." Rachel stared at the photo. Adrian Morrow, her former superior, once her handler. The man who ordered her last mission, the one that went sideways in Prague and left 3 assets dead and her name on a burn list. She had seen his body in flames. Or thought she had. "He knew about Sophie," she said slowly. "He knew everything about you," Ben replied. "He trained you, then sold you out." She folded the photo and tucked it into her coat. "Where is he now?" "DC, maybe. But if he has your daughter, he will not keep her there. Too much heat. My guess is he is moving her to one of his off-the-book facilities. Old CIA black sites, flipped and privatized. I found a lead, something buried under a warehouse shell company near Richmond. Might be one of his." Rachel looked out the slit in the boxcar wall. The sun was rising. Her daughter was out there, alone, afraid, surrounded by mercenaries. I am going after him, she said. Ben nodded slowly. I figured. Not for revenge. For her. Of course. He hesitated. But Rachel, this is not just about Sophie. He is making a move. Global. Bigger than you or me. I have been tracking pieces, arms transfers, encrypted data sales, dead agents in 4 countries. If he is back, this is the opening shot. She looked at him. Then I will aim for the throat. He handed her a flash drive. Encrypted blueprints of the Richmond facility. Nothing on paper. Once you breach, you are on your own. I always was. Rachel turned to leave, but Ben called out. Do you ever think about what they made us do? She paused. All the time. Then she vanished into the morning fog. 2 hours later, Rachel stood atop a hill overlooking an abandoned industrial park outside Richmond. Trees pressed against the chain-link fence like they were trying to reclaim the land. The warehouse below looked dead. No lights, no movement. But Rachel knew better. She moved down the hill, ducking under brush, heart steady. No adrenaline, just focus. She circled the perimeter. Thermal signatures confirmed 3 guards, 2 outside, 1 on the catwalk near the upper windows. She slipped through a gap in the fence, pressed herself against the wall, and waited. The first guard rounded the corner. She struck fast, an elbow to the throat, hand over the mouth, blade drawn across the carotid. Silent. Clean. She caught the body and dragged it behind an old generator. The second guard was harder, younger, faster. He saw the glint of her knife and raised his rifle, but she fired first, 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head. The body hit the dirt, kicking up dust. Inside, someone shouted. So much for stealth. Rachel kicked the side door open and swept the hallway. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, rows of locked rooms. She moved like a shadow, clearing each room with the grace of someone who had done this hundreds of times. She reached a heavy security door. Coded lock. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket and plugged it into the control panel's USB port. The override program Ben provided took 20 seconds. The door hissed open. Inside, a long hallway lined with cell doors. Cameras. Bloodstains on the floor. Rachel moved quickly, scanning faces. Empty. Empty. Then, Sophie. Room 4. She was slumped in the corner, tied, gagged, but alive. Bruised. Her eyes widened as Rachel entered. For a second the teenager stared, confused. Then came a muffled sob. Rachel crossed the room and cut the ties. Sophie crumpled into her arms. You came, she whispered. Always. Rachel helped her up and turned, just in time to hear the steel door slam shut behind them. A voice crackled over the intercom. Hello, Rachel. She froze. It was him. Morrow. You really think this was about her? He said, voice smooth, amused. You were the target. She was the bait. And now, you are both mine. Rachel's heart pounded. Sophie gripped her hand tightly. Morrow's voice continued. You walked right into the lion's den, and you brought your guilt with you. The lights went out. Total darkness. Sophie clung to Rachel as the black site fell silent, the only sound their breathing and the soft hum of something mechanical deep in the walls. Rachel crouched low, pressing her back against the cold concrete, pistol in one hand, the other gripping her daughter's wrist. Stay behind me, she whispered. She could not see Sophie's face, but she felt the girl nod. Overhead, the ventilation system kicked in with a low whir. Then the lights returned, dim red strips running along the floor, casting long, bloody shadows. Morrow's voice came through again. Welcome home. Rachel scanned the room. No windows. Single reinforced door. Cinder block walls, the kind you never walk out of. "You built this place for ghosts," she called out. "But I am not dead yet." "Not yet," he replied, amused. "But I intend to correct that." She guided Sophie behind a steel filing cabinet and took quick stock of their gear. 1 pistol, 2 spare mags, a small utility knife, no comms. Minimal. Sophie pulled the gag from her mouth and winced. "Who is that?" Rachel exhaled slowly. "His name is Adrian Morrow. He used to run operations for the CIA. Black files, the kind that do not exist. He trained people like me. Then he vanished." "He kidnapped me because of you?" Rachel looked at her daughter. "He kidnapped you for me." Suddenly the intercom hissed. Then, a high-pitched frequency screeched through the speakers. Sophie clapped her hands over her ears and cried out. Rachel grabbed the wiring near the wall panel and yanked it free, silencing the room. Then came the click. Gas. A faint hiss, barely audible. Rachel grabbed Sophie and yanked her shirt up over her nose. "Breathe slow. We are moving." She kicked open the vent cover near the floor and shoved Sophie inside. "Crawl. Straight line. Do not stop until you hit light." "What about you?" "I am right behind you." They moved. The vent was tight, barely wide enough for Rachel to crawl through. Her shoulders scraped metal. Sweat slid down her spine. Sophie's panicked breaths echoed ahead, but the girl kept moving. Then, light. They dropped down into what looked like a weapons storage bay, dimly lit and half empty. Rachel helped Sophie down and shut the vent behind them. "You okay?" Sophie's eyes were wide but focused. "I am not 5 anymore, Mom." Rachel nodded. "I noticed." She turned to the room, racks of empty shelves, 1 locked cabinet in the corner. Jackpot. Rachel picked the lock in 20 seconds. Inside, 2 rifles, 4 loaded mags, flashbangs, and body armor. She tossed Sophie a vest and slung one over herself. "What now?" Sophie asked. Rachel strapped on the rifle. "Now we find the exit and burn this place to the ground." They moved fast, silent, clearing each corridor with precision. Rachel's instincts were dialed to 11, the years of training burning back to life with every step. "Why did you leave?" Sophie asked as they crept through the hallway. Rachel paused. "I did not want you to grow up around blood. But you left me with strangers." Rachel swallowed hard. "Strangers I trusted. You were supposed to be safe." Sophie stopped walking. "Do you even know what it was like? Growing up with pieces of a story, never the whole thing? Always wondering who my mother really was?" Rachel turned to face her. "I know exactly what that feels like. Because I grew up the same way." They locked eyes. For a moment, neither of them was a spy or a captive or a scared teenager, just a mother and daughter, wounded and unfinished. Then, footsteps. Rachel raised a hand. 2 guards, tactical gear, Morrow's men. Rachel pushed Sophie against the wall and opened fire, 2 short bursts. 1 guard dropped immediately. The second ducked behind a column and returned fire. Concrete shattered. Rachel rolled, came up on 1 knee and dropped him with a headshot. Silence. She checked Sophie. No blood, just shock. "We are okay," Rachel said, "but they know we are moving." "Let's make it count," Sophie whispered. Rachel almost smiled. Minutes later, they reached a command room with wide glass windows overlooking a server bank. The room was empty. Rachel pulled a laptop from the rack and tapped into the network. Ben's backdoor codes worked. She pulled up the facility map. They were 3 levels below ground. 2 elevators, both locked remotely. No stair access, standard for black sites. But there it was, a maintenance shaft leading up to the roof, used for emergency power cables. Rachel grabbed Sophie's hand. This is our exit. As they turned to leave, the monitor lit up. Morrow's face. Live feed. He smiled. You are making this interesting. Rachel clenched her fists. This ends tonight. Oh, it will, he replied. But not how you think. The screen split. A new feed. Ben Keller, tied to a chair, bloodied. Morrow leaned into the camera. You came back for your daughter. But you never learned. People around you die. Sophie gasped. Who is that? Rachel stepped forward. A friend. He helped me find you. Now he is leverage, Morrow said. Walk out that roof hatch and I let him live. Stay and try to rescue him. Well, you already know how that goes. The feed cut out. Rachel stared at the blank screen. Mom? Sophie's voice cracked. We have to go. Rachel nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed on the terminal. This was the trap. The real one. Morrow wanted her to make a choice, again. Like Prague, like Caracas. Leave someone behind or lose everything. This time, she was not leaving anyone behind. Not Ben, not Sophie. No one. She picked up the rifle. We changed the game. Rachel stood frozen in front of the blank screen, her eyes narrowing at the reflection it cast back. The quiet in the room hummed with tension. Behind her, Sophie paced in tight circles, adrenaline still buzzing beneath her skin. You said we had to go, Sophie whispered. Now. Rachel exhaled slowly. Her mind was calculating again. Angles, odds, entry points, exits. Ben was alive. For now. But not for long. She turned to her daughter. There's a maintenance shaft leading to the roof, she said. You're taking it. Sophie's eyes widened. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. No, I finally have answers. I finally have you. I'm not running again. Rachel stepped forward, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders. Sophie, listen to me. Morrow wants you close, so I'll stay vulnerable. That's how he works. If you're gone, his leverage weakens. And if I go and you die, I lose you anyway. I won't die. You can't promise that. Rachel paused. You're right. I can't. But I can give you a chance. And I trust you to take it. Sophie's jaw trembled, but she nodded. Barely. Rachel hugged her tightly. Go to the roof. Use the smoke flare in my pack. Ben programmed an extraction signal. Someone will come. Tell them everything. What if they don't come? Rachel met her eyes. Then you disappear. Live. Be free. They held each other for a beat longer. Then Rachel pressed a flash drive into her palm. Evidence. Everything Morrow's done. Get it out. Sophie turned and slipped into the shadows of the maintenance shaft without another word. Rachel stood there a moment longer, then turned and loaded the last 2 magazines into her rifle. No more hiding. 10 minutes later, Rachel moved through the lower corridors like a phantom. She had memorized the layout from the terminal. The holding cells were near the old interrogation wing, 1 level deeper. She disabled 2 cameras with signal jammers she had cobbled together from the command room's wiring. She was back in field mode now. Calm, focused, every footstep deliberate, every shadow a possible threat. She found the door to the detention wing, locked. She rigged a small flashbang with a concussion spike and stepped back. Boom! Metal shrieked and gave way. Smoke poured out into the corridor. Rachel moved through it like a ghost, rifle raised. Inside, 3 holding rooms. Ben was in the 3rd. His face was bloodied, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. Rachel rushed to him and cut the bindings. You idiot, he rasped. I told you not to come back for me. She half smiled. And when have I ever listened? He grunted. Sophie? Gone. headed for extraction. He nodded. Good. She helped him to his feet. He limped badly. You're gonna have to shoot your way out, he said. I know. Suddenly alarms blared. Morrow had found the breach. We have 5 minutes before this place is locked down, Rachel said. Let's move. They pushed through side corridors and service routes. The red lights flickered overhead as security doors slammed shut behind them, narrowing their path. Rachel handed Ben her sidearm. Cover our 6. Hell of a reunion, he muttered. They reached the elevator shaft. The main elevator was locked, but the emergency access ladder still functioned. Rachel hoisted Ben over her shoulder, his weight slowing her, but she pressed forward, her body straining with each rung. Midway up, gunfire echoed from below. Morrow's men were close. Keep climbing, she whispered. By the time they reached the rooftop hatch, the sky had turned charcoal gray. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Sophie's flare glowed bright orange against the clouds, smoke twisting like a signal fire. But no chopper. Rachel pulled Ben to cover behind a vent pipe. She made it, he said, coughing. I told her to run if no one came. She's not going anywhere, she's yours. Rachel checked her rifle. 2 rounds left. Footsteps. From the far end of the roof, Morrow appeared. No mask, no guards, just him. Rachel stood slowly, gun lowered. Morrow, she called. Monroe, he replied. You always did have terrible timing. She took a step forward. Let her go. This ends here. It already ended, he said calmly. You just refuse to admit it. His eyes flicked to the sky. You know they're not coming, right? Langley's done with you. You're a liability. Rachel smirked. Then why are you still talking? He lifted his weapon. She moved first. 2 shots rang out. Rachel dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Morrow stood, untouched. Then, he staggered. A red bloom spread across his chest. He collapsed. Rachel lowered her smoking rifle. Ben stood behind her, the pistol in his hand. Figured I owed you one. They approached the body. Morrow lay still. No pulse. Rachel knelt beside him. You used Sophie. You used me. Ben spit. He used all of us. She grabbed a satchel from Morrow's side. Inside, files, drives, dossiers marked with code names she had not heard in years. Evidence. Then, over the horizon, a sound. Chopper blades. Rachel looked up. Sophie stood near the flare, waving. A black helicopter descended slowly. Rachel exhaled for the first time in hours. 10 minutes later, they were airborne. Sophie sat between Rachel and Ben, wrapped in a blanket, her head on her mother's shoulder. Rachel stared out the window, the black sight shrinking behind them, smoke rising from its burned remains. Ben shifted beside her. You going dark again? Rachel shook her head. No more running. The safe house in northern Pennsylvania sat nestled behind thick trees and an old barn. From the outside, it looked like a rundown hunting lodge. Inside, it was cold steel and reinforced concrete. Rachel had not been here in over 9 years. Sophie sat on the couch in an oversized hoodie, legs curled under her, watching the fire flicker in the stone hearth. Her eyes were distant, still processing. Rachel knew the look. It had taken her years to stop wearing it. Ben sat at the dining table, his leg propped on a chair, patchwork bandage over his thigh. He nursed a glass of whiskey, grimacing at each sip. Rachel stood at the counter with the files they had taken from Morrow's satchel spread before her, paper records, old-school encryption drives, and coded correspondence. Names, locations, flagged accounts. It was more than just a hit list. It was a blueprint. Some of these names are still active, she muttered. Ben leaned forward. Let me guess. Off-book operators, corporate fronts, ghost shells. She nodded. Morrow was building something, not just mercenaries, infrastructure, technology, biological systems, psychological warfare, blackmail networks. Deep shadow stuff, Ben muttered. Why would he keep it all in one place? Rachel's voice was flat. Because he never thought anyone could take it from him. Sophie stood up and crossed the room. What are you going to do with it? Rachel looked at her daughter. That depends. What do you want me to do with it? Sophie hesitated. I want to be safe. But I don't want this to happen to anyone else. What he did, it wasn't just to us. Rachel looked back at the files. I can hand this to Langley, Ben offered. Slide it into the right hands. They might bury it, but they won't ignore it. No, Rachel said. We don't hand this over. We expose it. Ben looked up, surprised. To the public? To the people who still care, Rachel said. Journalists, whistleblowers, veterans with clearance and a voice, people who can't be bought. That's dangerous. Rachel's eyes narrowed. So is silence. Later that night, Rachel stepped outside into the cold. The stars burned above the trees, clear and sharp. The kind of sky you only see far away from cities and war zones. Sophie joined her, arms crossed against the cold. You ever think about what life would have been like if you hadn't left? She asked. Rachel exhaled. All the time. Why did you pick that life? The missions, the danger, the lies. I didn't pick it, Rachel said. I was recruited. I thought I was doing something that mattered, and I believed that as long as I stayed in the shadows, you would never be touched. Sophie looked down. They lied to you. They did, Rachel said, but I lied to myself too. Sophie leaned against her. So what happens now? Rachel looked at the stars. Now we take away their shadows. By morning, Ben had tapped into a private satellite relay through an old channel from his CIA days. They began uploading the files, slowly, securely, encrypting packets and bouncing them through proxy servers. Rachel drafted an anonymous message explaining the network, its methods, and its danger. She signed it only with one word: Ghostlight. It was a phrase from her old unit. The moment you expose a covert threat to open air, the moment you turn on the light. 2 days later, while Rachel monitored the last of the file transfers, an alert popped up on Ben's terminal. Incoming message. Encrypted. Rachel opened it. A single line. You missed one. Attached. A photo. Sophie, from 2 hours ago, outside the safe house. Taken from a distant ridge. A sniper's angle. Rachel's blood ran cold. Ben! She shouted. He was already at the window, scanning the tree line. Tell me we're off the grid. I wiped every signal before we got here, he said. Nothing should have leaked. They found us anyway. Rachel grabbed her rifle. Sophie had just stepped outside to get wood for the fire. Rachel burst through the door. Sophie, down! The girl froze, then dropped just as a shot rang out. Bark exploded above her head. Rachel dove, tackled her, and rolled behind a tree. 3 more shots. Suppressed. Clean. Rachel returned fire blindly, then dragged Sophie back toward the house. Inside, Ben hit the emergency lock. We've got less than a minute before they triangulate. How many? Rachel asked. 3 heat signatures, maybe 4. Rachel turned to Sophie. Hide in the crawl space. Do not come out until I say so. Sophie disappeared into the panel behind the fireplace. Ben handed Rachel a second rifle. Looks like the quiet life's over. Was it ever really quiet? She asked. Another shot shattered a window. Rachel took a deep breath, loaded her last magazine, and stepped into the hallway, eyes fixed on the front door. This was no longer about survival. It was war. The front door exploded inward. Rachel moved before the dust even cleared, rolling across the floor and firing into the breach. Two men in tactical gear rushed through. She dropped one with a shot to the throat, the other with a burst to the chest. Ben dragged a bookshelf in front of the broken window, then fired through the slats at shadows moving beyond the tree line. "They're surrounding us!" he shouted. Rachel's mind raced. Whoever these men were, they were not freelancers. The gear was too precise, their movement too coordinated. These were operators, military trained, off books. She ducked behind the kitchen counter and reloaded. "They're not here for surveillance," Ben said. "This is an extraction or a kill order." "They want the files back," Rachel replied. "And they want me quiet." "They're late. The Ghostlight upload is almost complete." She paused. "Then we just need to hold them off long enough." Another impact shook the walls, back entrance this time. Rachel sprinted through the hallway, cut down a man breaching the rear door with a flashbang, and slammed the steel door closed behind his body. Blood smeared the hinges. From the crawlspace panel behind the hearth, she heard a faint knock. Rachel ducked and opened it. Sophie crouched inside, pale but focused. "We're okay," Rachel said. "Stay down. Do not come out." "No matter what." Sophie's lip trembled. "I'm not leaving you." Rachel's voice softened. "You already saved me, Sophie. You gave me something to fight for." She touched her daughter's cheek, then sealed the panel again. Back in the kitchen, Ben had been hit. Shoulder wound, not fatal, but bleeding fast. Rachel pulled him into cover. "How bad?" "I've had worse. In Honduras, maybe." She handed him another mag. "We hold the house. We finish the upload." He coughed. "And then what? You really think exposing them stops them?" "No," she said, "but it forces them into the light, makes them bleed." Another flashbang, a second wave. 4 men this time. Rachel and Ben cut them down in a brutal, smoke-filled gunfight that left the dining room shredded. The air stank of gunpowder and burning wood. Ben leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. "That has to be the last of them." Then a new sound, heavy rotor blades. Rachel looked up. A drone. Not a surveillance type. A combat drone, military grade. She ran to the window and saw it hover above the treetops, target acquisition sensors glowing red. "Ben," she whispered. "Get Sophie. Get out." "What about you?" She grabbed a flash drive from the terminal and yanked it free. "The upload's done, but the original, this, stays safe. Take her and run, now." "What are you doing?" She turned to him. "I'm buying you time." Outside, Rachel stepped into the yard, arms raised. The drone hovered. Her voice was steady. "This is Rachel Monroe, former CIA operations specialist. I have no weapons, but I have the data you're here to destroy." No response. Then a voice crackled through a nearby headset. Someone had tapped her comms. "Monroe, we warned you." It was not Morrow. It was a woman. Cold. Controlled. "You're not the agency," Rachel said. "No. We're what comes after." And then the drone fired. The missile struck the cabin. The blast knocked Rachel back 10 feet. Heat roared through the trees. Flames lit up the night sky. She crawled to her feet, dazed, bloodied, coughing. Ben. Sophie. She ran toward the wreckage, but the back of the house was already engulfed. Then she heard movement. 2 shapes emerging from the trees, coughing, one limping. Ben. Carrying Sophie. Rachel ran to them, pulled them into a ditch as a second drone passed overhead. "We've got 30 seconds, Ben gasped. "What's the plan?" Rachel looked down at the flash drive in her hand. "We disappear." By morning, the cabin was ash. No bodies, no hard evidence. The enemy would think they were dead, but they were not, and they were not done. 3 days later, in a motel room outside Chicago, Rachel sat on the bed, watching a newscast. The Ghostlight leak had gone public. Names, operations, untraceable accounts, covert assassinations. Congress was calling for hearings. The Pentagon was denying everything. The president's spokesman had refused to comment. But it was out. The public knew. Sophie sat beside her, watching, silent. Ben stood at the window, arm in a sling. "We're in deeper than we ever thought," he said. Rachel nodded. "This is bigger than Morrow, bigger than any of us." "And it's still out there," Sophie added. Rachel reached into her duffel bag, pulled out the encrypted second drive, the one with the remaining files they had not yet released. She looked at them both. "Then we keep going." 3 weeks later, somewhere in Montana. Snow drifted gently across the ridge as Rachel scoped the valley through a pair of binoculars. A long, winding road cut through pine-covered hills below, empty except for the occasional utility truck and a flock of birds skimming over power lines. Behind her, inside a modest log cabin, an actual cabin this time, not a cover identity or safe house, Ben was building a makeshift comms rig out of salvaged gear and encrypted relays. Sophie was hunched over a battered laptop, sorting through the last of the Ghostlight files. They were off the grid. Again. But this time, they were not hiding. They were watching. The leak had done more than shake up the media. It had drawn blood. Congressional hearings had already exposed private military contracts linked to Morrow's off-the-books team. Careers had collapsed. One senator had resigned under a cloud of classified accusations. Others were pretending not to sweat. Yet. Still, Rachel knew better. The Hydra had lost a head. But the body lived on. She stepped inside, the wind following her like an old ghost. Ben looked up. "Surveillance from the ridge?" Rachel nodded. "Nothing we can't handle. If they're coming, they're not rushing." Sophie spun the laptop around. "I found something." Rachel leaned over the screen. It was a list. Names, encrypted tags, transaction routes buried under shell companies and fake non-profits. "What am I looking at?" Rachel asked. "This isn't just Morrow's legacy, it's recruitment. Deep cover assets. Kids." Rachel's stomach turned. "They're targeting orphans, runaways, trafficked teens, grooming them into operators." Ben swore under his breath. "They're building the next generation." Rachel stared at the screen, her fingers curled into fists. "I thought I ended this," she said quietly. "No," Sophie said. "You started this. Now we finish it." That night, as snow piled quietly against the windows, Rachel stood alone in the living room, staring at an old photograph tucked into the frame of a mirror. Her and Sophie, back when she was still a mother pretending not to be a spy. She thought of all the choices she had made, some noble, many desperate, the walls she had built, the bodies she had left behind, the life she had sacrificed to keep her daughter out of the crosshairs. And somehow, that daughter had walked back into her life, not just as a survivor, but as a fighter. "You never quit," came a voice behind her. "Ben." Rachel did not turn. "You think that's a good thing?" "I think it's who you are." She turned to face him. "I never wanted this for her." "No, but you gave her the truth. Most kids don't get that." Rachel watched the fire flicker. "The truth nearly got her killed." "But it didn't." He paused, then added, "And now she's going to help change the world with it." In the weeks that followed, the trio worked like a small insurgency. They launched Ghostlight 2, this time targeting the deep cover recruitment network. Sophie coordinated with journalists. Ben decoded communication trees. Rachel tracked down recruiters and middlemen, feeding their locations to allies still embedded in official channels. Each leak hit like a pressure wave. Each name exposed was another dent in the machine. The group that once controlled Rachel's life had underestimated one thing. They taught her too well. And now, the woman they trained to disappear was fighting in full view. Months later, sitting on a park bench outside a federal courthouse in D.C., Rachel watched as a heavily redacted document was read aloud before the press. An official acknowledgement of covert abuses carried out by unauthorized actors within U.S. intelligence networks. It was not a full confession, not justice, not yet. But it was something. Sophie sat beside her, hoodie up, sunglasses on. "You think they'll come after us again?" she asked. Rachel took a breath. "Eventually." Sophie nodded. "Then we keep going?" Rachel smiled faintly. "We keep going." Ben walked up with coffee in hand, sat beside them. "You know," he said, "we could just vanish. Start over. Find a beach. Disappear." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Do you really believe that?" He smirked. "Not even a little." Sophie leaned forward. "What's next?" Rachel glanced at her watch. "We've got a flight to Denver in 2 hours. A Ghostlight contact says there's a contractor facility in Colorado with black budget funding and no oversight." Ben sighed. "Of course there is." Rachel stood. Sophie stood with her. And together they walked toward the storm, not hiding, not running, exposing, fighting, free.